want to be really clear. For the next 4 weeks, we're talking about debt. But I am not coming to you from a place of power or strength or advice giving. I am inviting you into reflection with me. And I hope that you'll find some of what we discover together to be as useful as I have in my own life. So, why are we having a sermon series on debt? What does debt have to do with the church? And why are we even talking about it? Don't you know that talking about money makes me uncomfortable? That's exactly why we're talking about it. Good, sacred people, good Christians, we don't talk about money in church. Okay, so this is my point. This is where I'm coming from. We talk about money because money matters to us. Can I get a show of hands of anybody that didn't touch money in some way this week? Either electronically or physically. Anybody didn't have anything to do with money this week? It matters to us, and what matters to us matters to who? What matters to us matters to God. That's why we talk about money. Why we're going to be talking about debt is even deeper than that. In John 10:10, in the verse that I have been sharing with you already in this service, Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly." Now, in this verse, Jesus was talking about, he was putting himself up against the religious leaders of the day. Because the religious leaders of the day had created a culture that made following God a burden. And it made following God almost impossible. And it made the fact that you couldn't follow God or couldn't live up to it shameful. And Jesus said, "I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly." Why? Because a life lived under that kind of tyranny is no life at all. It certainly isn't abundant life, right? Debt in Canada in December of 2019, just credit card debt, okay? Just credit card debt, we crossed the $100 billion mark just in Canada. So if you're in debt, as I am, you're not alone. However, debt is a burden. Now some, it's not. So I'm not talking to you. If you're managing your finances well and it doesn't keep you up at night and you don't worry about it and you don't struggle with it and you don't feel consumed by it sometimes, I'm not talking to you, so you can just sit quietly in your seat and bear with me. But if you're one who struggles, who looks at the bottom line on their credit card and says, "How did we get here? What are we going to do about this? Is there any way out?" Then I'm talking to you. So let's start with a definition. I am borrowing this definition from Pete Briscoe. Pete Briscoe is the minister who has a 4-part series, which I am borrowing from Heverly, because it was very clear to me that if I was going to preach a series on money, it wasn't coming from my wisdom. Okay? So Pete Briscoe uses this definition, and boy, this one made me sit up. He says, debt is buying money so that we can buy things we can't afford to buy. Right? I'll say it again. Debt is buying money so that we can buy things we can't afford to buy. Now, let me just back up the bus a little bit. Some of those things we need to buy, right? We maybe need to buy a house, we maybe need to buy a car, and whatever we've bought, we're not here, this isn't about an exercise in shame, okay? But it's just to kind of set us back and get us to think about it in terms of a God who wants us to have abundant life and came to set us free. If you are in debt, you are in good company. And if you're in debt, it's because some of the best marketing minds in the entire planet have been working on teaching us that debt is okay for generations. Well, I don't know for how long, but for a long time. And ingrained now in our society are some presuppositions. So I just want to read some of these to you and just ask which of them might be true for you. You may not, none of these might resonate, but let's see. And I'm not going to have a show of hands. So relax. The first one is, debt is a tool that we use to create prosperity for ourselves. Having a car payment is just a reality of life. We got to get around. Leasing a car is what sophisticated people do. It's the worst way to get a car, apparently. But I can't give you the numbers on that. Just taking people's word for it. A 90-day payment-free option is like free money. You need to get a credit card to build credit. This is one of my favorites. Teenagers need to be given a credit card so they can know how to handle their money. And perhaps we should give them a loaded gun and a 40 of Jack Daniels at the same time so they know how to handle guns and liquor. Right? Teenagers should be given a credit card to help to learn how to handle their money. And I want you to know, I don't know if that happens here, but in the States, teenagers get letters offering them credit cards. And then you need credit cards to do things like book hotels and book flights and rent a car. Well, that maybe have been true at one time, but it's not so much true anymore. And I think the big one is, if there were no debt, our economy would collapse. So let me just stop here for a minute. We are over $100 billion in credit card debt in Canada. How's our economy doing? Anyway, these are things, when I first heard them, I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard that. The truth is, when we stop and listen to them in a different setting, we maybe hear them differently. So these are the things that our credit companies have paid the world's top marketing minds to ingrain into our society. But there is something they don't want us to know. They don't want us to know that 7 out of 10 people who go bankrupt do so because of credit card debt. They don't want us to think about the fact that after infidelity, money and debt are the second most common cause of divorce. Okay, so we're in church. So then the next question might be is debt a sin? Now that's not language we use. So is debt wrong? Is it somehow outside of God's will for us? are there rules about it? And the answer is no. There are a bunch of verses in the Bible that people will trot out to try to guilt people about debt and about the fact that as good Christians they shouldn't be in debt. But the truth is, some of them are in Deuteronomy, and the book of Deuteronomy was written to an agrarian society. And beyond that, the rules in Deuteronomy were to a people to whom God had given their land, so they didn't have to buy it. So a lot of that stuff doesn't fit for us, and it's like in Deuteronomy there's the blessings if you remember God, and there's the curses if you forget God, and we are under grace, not under law, thank goodness. There is a verse in Exodus that has something to offer us when talking about borrowing and lending. Do we have it? Exodus? Lily? Okay. Exodus? It says, "If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you shall not deal with them as a creditor. You shall not exact interest from them." Okay, so if anybody's involved with banking, just breathe. Okay? This is not talking to banking people. Okay? This is talking to us. And the theme is when somebody in our community, our circle of people is hurting, give them money. Don't loan them money at interest. Right? If someone that we know is hurting, give to them. Don't add to their burden by loaning to them at interest. That's what this is talking about. And then there's a New Testament verse in Romans. There we go. This one has to be about money, right? Owe no one anything. There we go. If you owe anybody anything, Nope. Totally taken out of context. The entire verse in Romans 3:13-8 is, owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. This is not about money. This is about living lives of love, where we are caring for each other, and that's what we're called to do. So it's saying, don't leave people unloved. Don't owe them the love that is their due as a child of God, as your neighbor, as your friend, as someone in your community. So, this does not say that debt is sinful. So, none of these say that debt is sinful. And I would encourage you, if you want to go check it out, look through the Bible. See where it talks about money. See who it's being talked to. Who's being talked to. What's the whole situation that they're in. These don't say that debt is sinful or wrong or outside of God's will for us, or however you want to name that, right? But just because it's not sinful or wrong doesn't mean it's wise. There is one verse that speaks directly to debt, and I don't know if you noticed it, tucked in there in Proverbs 22, among all the other pithy wisdom statements, which is what Proverbs is made up of. There is this one. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. I don't know about any of you. I didn't know that existed in the Bible. And the first time I heard it, it made me sit back and have to catch my breath. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave of the lender. Now, I imagine that if, we're not going to do this, so don't worry. But if we broke up into small groups or even broke up into one big group, we could have a really, really powerful discussion right now in our world about this verse. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. And it really took me up short the first time I heard it. When I owe money, I'm a slave. When I owe money, I've given up some of my freedom. I've given up some of my rights. I've given up, and yeah, I have rights. They're all listed in those long pieces of paper with all the small print that I sign at the bottom. And sorry to the lawyers in the room, I don't usually read all the way through, right? Because I trust my bank, which is exactly what they want me to do, right? This isn't about blame. The point is, I didn't need to ask myself, is debt sinful? But I needed to ask myself, is it what I want? Do I want to be the slave of my bank? So, Jesus came so that we could have life and have it more abundantly, so that we could know freedom and be lifted out of that burden that the religious leaders of the time were putting on people. And he also, later on in the Bible, he says, Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus isn't about heavy-duty shame, guilt, and fear, or midnight waking up wondering how we're going to make that payment, or Jesus is about freedom. He's about abundant life. So, the point again, and I keep reminding you of this, because when I'm thinking about money, when I'm thinking about debt, I have to consciously stop and remind myself that this is not an exercise in shame. We are not looking back at all of the choices that we've ever made and saying, oh. This is an opportunity to move forward with a different set of glasses. We have been marketed some ideas about debt. I bought them hook, line, and sinker. And the funny thing is, okay, all my life, well, ever since I was old enough to talk about debt, my dad has made it very, very clear that you don't buy anything that you can't pay off completely at the end of the month. And you know what? My dad was disciplined enough to do that. God love him. And when we sat down, so he could sign the purchase papers for my van, because the bank wouldn't even look at me in 2011, 2012, right? The loan guy at the car dealership went, wow, I have never seen a credit score this good. I have never seen credit this good. But that's because he was disciplined. I wasn't disciplined. And so, what the point of this is, not to look back at the decisions we've made, it's to look forward at the decisions we can make, right? And ask, when I'm signing, realize when I'm signing on the line, I'm signing a portion of my life and freedom away. So, I need to ask myself, what am I willing to give part of my life to a bank or credit card company for? And let me tell you, when I look at my credit card statements over the last few months, again, reminding myself that this is not an exercise in shame, but an exercise in awareness, right? I have to say, Was that dinner out with the family? Was that worth being in slavery? Is this item, this dinner, this vacation? There are things we need to buy, and that's okay. But the point here is that Jesus came to give us freedom and to give us abundant life. And so when we do sit down, when we do determine that something is worth using our credit for, we should be asking ourselves two questions. There should be two things we focus on. We sit down. One is this item worth the slavery? Is it worth any stress it might put on my relationship? Is it worth any stress it might put on me going to a job that doesn't work? Will it lock me in bad habits? Will it affect my mental health? And the other thing that we need to ask ourselves, if we say, yeah, it's worth it, I want this, we need a house or we need a car or whatever, then we maybe could be asking ourselves, how quickly can I get out from under this? And what am I willing to do that? Now, there's a book. It's actually a children's book on debt. It is called The Dangerous Pet. And at the end of the sermon that I watched, the guy read it to the congregation. I couldn't get a copy soon enough, but it is for sale and you can get one. The point is, we are surrounded by this all the time, but we are also surrounded by and filled with the Spirit. Now again, I'm not saying don't buy things with credit. I'm just sharing with you that when I heard this verse, it really made me sit up and take a look at my finances in a way I hadn't in the past. Jesus died so I could be free. Do I want to be a slave? No. I don't have to beat myself up. I just need to look for the people who can help me know what the next steps are. We have a Savior who came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. If debt's not an issue for you, that's great. If debt's a burden that you face regularly, just know that there's a way out. I can't tell you what it is, but there are people who can. And we can walk it together. And if you ever need to talk about it, you certainly won't be judged in my office. I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. We can be free. We are not meant to be slaves. Amen. We're going to spend some time in sacred silence to remember, to consider, to focus on some of the things that spoke to us in the service today. Let's take some time in quiet.